Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Learn Coding for Free. My name is KJ Singh. I'm a software professional with over 20 year experience. I believe coding is easy to learn and with the right guidance anyone can take this up. Our endeavor is to spread the knowledge and help people take up coding. This is our way of giving back to society. I can promise you that if you watch this video, you will get very good understanding of coding concepts and also you'll start coding in next 45 minutes. Again, welcome to the channel. I urge you to subscribe to this channel and also like this video. Happy learning. Our mission is to teach coding for free. We would like to teach 1 million people how to code. We'll provide quality content and provide advanced guidance in coding. Goal of video number 1. We'll provide introduction to coding in next 1 hour. Answer all your common questions. Code and test 5 sample codes in a certain language, which we'll disclose in subsequent slides. We'll guide you to take up advanced topics in coding. We'll also answer all your common questions. Typically, someone who's interested in learning coding will have these questions. How many computer languages are there? What languages to learn to start with? How difficult is coding? Do I need some background in software? Can someone handhold me and walk me through coding process? How do you download and install the required software? How to learn the advanced concept in coding? Can I code a mobile application, game, e-commerce site? We will answer all these questions as we go along. The good thing is no past experience is required to take up this course. That's correct. No software background is required to comprehend this course. Very comprehensive theory and examples are given to help you learn coding. You can learn on smartphone and practice on laptop or desktop. In fact, my recommendation is that you watch this video in the first pass, try to understand what we're doing, and in the second pass you can use your laptop or desktop to try these examples. This course is suitable for school, college, engineering students, business professionals and managers who want to understand coding. Anyone who is interested in learning coding will find it very useful. Overall plan is that we'll publish a series of videos that will cover beginners to advanced level. Our focus will be to build strong foundation for coding, offer fast-paced learning, that is from this first video onwards, you will start learning coding. We'll provide full coverage from installation instructions to coding to testing. Subsequent videos will cover advanced features and code samples. I urge you to subscribe to this channel and also click on the bell icon and like this video. Here we go. We are about to start our coding journey. As part of this, we'll learn some critical concepts about coding, and these are very important. What is coding? We'll learn about different computer languages, how to select a computer language that you want to learn, and coding fundamentals. What is coding? Coding is instruction written in computer language to get something done. Let me give an illustration. For example, we all familiar with websites and the requirement to log in, where we see a user ID, password, and a sign in button, right? So if we have to create this screen, a login screen from scratch, what will be the logical instruction set? So I'm reading from the screen here. We'll display the screen, that is, we'll display the text user ID, which is here user ID, and a space to enter the input here, right? Display text password and space to enter the input, the text password here, and provide a space so that user can enter the password. Seek input of user ID from the user. Seek input of password from the user, that is, allow user to enter the values here, right? And once the user clicks on sign in or a login button, perform verification of user ID and password. Typically, when we are logging in, after we provide user ID and password, we click on login or sign in. At that point of time, our user ID and password is verified by the backend system, and based on that, we get a success or a failure message. based on the verification, and on successful login, the user is taken to the menu or the first screen. So these are the logical set of instructions that we have created to create a login screen, right? Now, coding is to convert above instructions, these instructions into a computer language, right? And it is important to note that every language will have its own command or syntax to write the code. So what that means is, if we have to create a login screen in different languages, every language will have its own code or its own syntax, although it won't be too much different, but the commands or the syntax, it's called, the commands are called the syntax, will be different. We'll cover that as we go along. Computer languages, we have come to this important section of the course where we learn about computer languages. There are various computer languages. The famous ones are Python, Java, C, C Sharp, C++, JavaScript, HTML, Perl, PHP, Ruby. They all serve a certain purpose. Mobile applications are written in various languages. For Android, we have two language choices. It's called Kotlin and also Java. For Apple iOS, apps are written in Swift programming language. And there are tons of other languages which are for specific purposes. For example, R is used for statistics and Go is used for networking kind of task. So these are the various computer languages which are there. Please note that I have not covered all possible languages. There must be hundreds of languages, but these are some of the famous languages which are used to make individual programs or programs for enterprises, right, or mobile applications. This is just to give you a basic orientation in various computer languages. Language selection. Language selection is very critical when you're trying to learn your first computer language. It should be easy to install. It should be simple to code using that language. It should provide good functionality so that you can do a lot with that language. It should be contemporary. It should be widely used commercially, and there should be demand for the skill in the market. Last three factors are important because if you're serious about programming and you pick up this language, which meets last three criteria, that is, it is contemporary, it is widely used commercially, and there's a demand in the marketplace, right? Then you can enhance your skills in this language and can aim for a professional career. Coding fundamentals. This is the most important slide in this video as it deals with teaching the basics of coding programming. Once you understand the concepts, you can take next steps and start coding in a select computer language. We discussed that code program is nothing but a set of instructions to achieve the desired results. All programming languages have common features that help us achieve this. Some of these concepts are covered here, and we will also demonstrate when we review the sample codes. Variables. Every language will have a variable. Typically, in every language, in every program that you want to code, you are required to take input from the user and process it. For instance, for the login screen that we just saw in the previous slide, we have to accept the user ID and password. The values entered by the user is stored in a space called variable. Once these variables are saved, we can use it to perform various functions. Like once we have the user ID saved in a variable, we can check in the database whether this user ID exists or not. So saving the input in the variable is critical so that we can process it. Apart from inputs from the user, variables can be used to store interim results. For example, in a program, you're required to sum up a set of numbers, right? So you can hold the sum of these numbers in a variable, and which can be used in some processing, right? So variables are used to save inputs from the user. It is used to save some interim value that you have in a program, and then these variables can be passed to the backend to verify the values. We also use variables when we scan a database and we retrieve a value. So variables are also used to store the retrieved values from the backend systems. Variables are of different type based on the value that they hold. For example, a variable may be of integer data type if it holds the integer value. It could be a character data type. It could be a string when it has to save a name, then it could be a string data type, and it could be a date data type because it will hold the date. So when we define a variable, we define variable based on a data type. As I said, it could be integer variable, it could be character variable, it could be string variable, it could be data type. So data type defines the type of variable that you want to define. The other type of functions that you have in a coding is reading and writing. Uh, so these are used to accept values from the user or to display a value to the user. So these are called reading and writing functions. Then there are functions, there are statements called if statements. Typically in a program, we are required to make some comparisons, check if a value matches, check if this is greater than this, check if this is less than this, right? So if we have to perform such checks in a program, we use if statement provided by the language. Loops. Loops are very critical. For example, if we have to perform a set of statements repeatedly on a data set, how do you do it? Let me give a practical example here. Let's say you are processing results of a class of a grade in a school, and for each student in that class, you have to calculate the percentage that they've scored. So what is required is you have to access the record of each student based on the marks scored for each subject, calculate the percentage, save the percentage for the student in a variable, and then perform the same set of calculations for the next student. So here the requirement is what? We are calculating percentage of marks scored for each student. So we are repeating a set of statements. So for such requirements, we can use the loop function. We will see an example of loop function when we do the sample code. Arithmetic operations are very common in our program where you want to add, subtract, calculate percentage, etc. So all arithmetic functions are supported. The next set of critical functions in our programming is reading from a file, writing to a file. Typically, when you write a program, you have to, apart from accepting inputs from the user, sometimes you have to read value from a file. Let's say you get a file from a different user from a different system and you want to process the file. So you need to have capability to read a file and also to write to a file. So these are the basic functions provided by any language. Now next is function. Typically what happens is a coding or a program is divided into subparts called for a purpose. The reason for this is typically you can have a very large program, a large code, right? And it will be very difficult to maintain and also comprehend what that code is doing. So a standard practice or a best practice in coding is typically we divide a program or a code in various functions. Now these functions kind of are determined based on the utility provided by the code. For example, in that login screen that we saw earlier, we might have a function which will read the input provided by the user, and the next part was the verification of the user ID and the password, right? So we can actually code the verification part in a separate function. And once we do that, we'll be dividing a large program into various functions which are more manageable and can easily be understood. So these are the very basic fundamentals of a computer language. I'll repeat here. We must understand the concept of variables. They hold input they hold any interim value. Data types, variables are of various data types based on the value that they hold. Uh, there are functions to read and write and accept input from the user or display output to a user. There are if statements to verify, to compare. There are loops to repeat a set of statements on different set of values. There are arithmetic operators, plus, minus, percentage, and many other. There are file read and write operations which are supported in every computer language. And there's a function. A function is a way to divide a program into smaller pieces based on the purpose that they serve so that it becomes much more readable and manageable. So these are the coding fundamentals. And the next thing to understand is what is syntax. Every language has its own command to achieve the above functionality. For example, every language will have variables, if statement, right? But how it is written is slightly different. So that is called the syntax of the language. Now, we don't have to remember the syntax for all languages. If we are switching to a different language, typically the language editors which are provided, they help us with the syntax. For example, in a Word document, when you're writing a Word document, the auto completion of a word or auto spell check, right? They help you in composing a document, right? Similarly, language editors help us in verifying the syntax of the code that we are writing. Things will be much more clear as we cover the sample code, because in sample code we have covered some of these concepts. For example, if statement, loops, arithmetic operators, uh, taking input from the user. So these concepts will be very clear once we cover the sample code. I urge you to subscribe to this channel and also like this video, and also click on the bell icon so that you get notification when we post new videos. Coding with Python. We have selected Python for this course. In this section, we'll cover why we have picked up Python. We'll walk through 5 sample Python source code and execute that code for you. We'll cover Python installation instructions and advanced concepts. Why Python? We have selected Python for this course because it's very easy to download and install. It's easy to learn. It's very feature rich. It offers wide variety of uses, from writing basic programs in Python to performing data science kind of task to artificial intelligence and data mining kind of task. It's all possible in Python. It's widely used commercially and very high demand for Python programmers. So if you're serious uh, about making this a profession, learning Python can give you a very good start. In this course, we'll be covering Python, and we'll be covering 5 sample source code in Python. These are, the first one is display a hello world on the screen. It's a very simple program which will only display hello world on the screen when we run the program. The next program will be how to create a login screen and accept user ID and password from the user. So this illustration we used in our course earlier, and we'll tell you how to code this screen in Python. The third source code will be accepting 2 numbers from the user and then adding them and showing the result to the user. The fourth source code will be accept a number from a user and find it if it's an even or an odd number. And fifth source code will be implement a conditional loop. Source code of all the sample code is available in the video description of the YouTube video. I highly recommend that you watch this video in the first pass and understand what we're doing. Look at the demonstration of the code, and in the second pass you can do the Python installation and execute the code yourself. Python sample code 1, hello world. This is a very simple piece of code in which uh, we'll be displaying hello world to the user. Uh, this is how we have organized the sample code for you. Under the first section called code, we have the source code, and under output is the output that will be displayed when we run this program. So obviously the first source code is very simple because it just displays hello world on the screen when we run it, and the code for this source code for this requirement is also very simple. Print is a command. Print is a command. Print is a command, and then in the print we put brackets, and also in the double quotes, whatever string that we put, it is shown to the user. So we'll run this shortly. Moving on to the second sample source code, which is display a login screen to the user. Now, code for this is slightly complex than the first one. Again, on top we have the header, display a login screen. One thing that you must understand is this is the source code for showing a login screen. Now, all the lines which are appearing in red, they are we put a hash here and then appearing in red. These are all the comment section in the source code. So the comments are there to facilitate the easy readability of the source code, to maintain the source code, to comprehend the source code. So these lines which are commented are not executed when we run the code. So these are only used to describe what the source code is doing. So you have first three lines where it says source code login screen in Python, define the variables that will hold the input value. Both user and password are declared as string variables. So now whatever we learned in the earlier slides, are we using those concepts now? We talked about variable. If you remember, we talked about variables earlier. So here we'll be accepting two inputs from the user ID and the password, and both are string variables. So we have defined two variables called user is equal to string and password is equal to empty string variable. Now we want to display a message to the user so that they can input the user ID and password. So the command for that is user is equal to input and enter user ID, password is equal to input, enter password. So what this does is, input is a command which tells the computer to read a value from the user, to ask the user for a value, and whatever value the user will enter will be saved in the variable called user, which was defined earlier. So what this command does, it shows, the command says input, right? So it will input a value from the user, and before it does it will say enter user ID, and whatever value will be entered will be saved in the user variable which was defined here. Similarly, password was a variable defined here, and what we are telling computer language is input, ask the user to input the value, show the message enter password, and whatever the user will enter will be saved in the variable called password, right? So once this is done, it will display a message that login has been successful, right? It will say print login. So this is the source code. When we run this source code, which we'll shortly do in a minute, this is the output that we'll see. First we'll see enter the user ID. Assume that I've entered Harry here. Then it will say enter the password, and I will enter the value here. Once I enter the value here, I will see a message called login successful, which is coming from here, right? So this is a very simple login screen that we have coded. But in the actual login screen, what happens is once you have accepted the user and password, there'll be a function called to a database in which we'll verify whether this user ID and password are correct or not, right? So we are missing that step here for obvious reasons, but hopefully this will give you some idea how a login screen is painted and how the variables are used to save those values. Now we'll demonstrate and run these two programs that we just reviewed. So what I've done is I've already saved these programs on the disk. Let me now run it for you. I've already installed Python in my computer. So I will go to the command prompt, which is also called MS-DOS shell. I will switch to the directory which has the Python code. In this case, it is Python code for me. Sorry, there is some. Okay. Now I'm in the Python code directory. I've already saved 5 sample codes here, which are hello world, login screen, finding odd and even numbers, while loop, and add numbers. So let me run the first program. We saw the source code earlier, so I'll say hello world .py because all Python programs are saved with the extension py. When I run this program, it has just displayed me the value hello world as expected. So this was the first execution of the program. So let me also execute the next code that we have already seen. Login screen. We've already seen the source code for this. So as expected, after run the program, it's showing me enter the user ID. I'm saying APC. After I enter the user ID, I get a prompt to enter password. I say PASS password, and then I get a message called login successful. So this is what we saw in that code, that we have two variables, user ID, input the user ID and save that in the user variable, input, enter password, and save that in password variable. So this is what we saw. We got a message called enter user ID. So this is coming from the input command. Enter password. This is coming from this command input, enter password, and whatever values we are saving are going into user ID and password field. And then we got a message called login successful. That is here, right? So now we'll execute our source code number 3, which is add two numbers. Before we execute the code, we will look at the code to start with. The overall format remains the same. The code is on top and the output that is expected is at the bottom in green. All the lines in red are actually comment lines. They are not executed. They are there just to describe the program. They help in improving the readability of the code. So here, we'll be adding two numbers. We'll be seeking two numbers from the user, and we'll be saving the results in a variable called sum. So here we are defining a variable. If you remember, we discussed this concept of a variable, and we want to save sum of two numbers in a variable. So this is the interim result we want to save, and we are defining a variable called sum. We are defining a variable called sum, and which is equal to 0. Then we are seeking number 1 and 2 from the user. So number 1 and number 2. We are seeking input enter first number. So this will prompt the user to enter the first number, and then input enter the second number. It will prompt the user to enter the second number, and whatever is entered against this will be saved in number 1. Whatever will be entered against second number here will be saved in number 2. And So after number 1 and number 2 are saved, we are using the variable called sum, and we are adding these numbers. Sum will hold the sum of number 1 and number 2, and then we'll print the sum is sum, right? So the output of this program should be like this. Enter the first number, will enter 50. Enter the second number, will enter 50. The sum is 100. So this is the expected output of this program. So let me go and execute this program. I have already saved this program in a Python source code. So let's run it. This particular source code is saved in add numbers. So let me run this source code, Python add numbers .py. So it is prompting me for the first number as expected. So I'll say first number is 50. Enter the second number, which is 50. So whatever I've entered has gone into num1 variable 50, and number 2 variable, let me change that to, let's say, 70. Okay, and let me put enter. The sum is 120. So we'll go back to the source code here. It is prompting me for two numbers. It is saving these two numbers into variables. I've entered 50 and 120, and the sum was 0, and then it's saying sum is equal to number 1, which was 50, plus number 2, which is 70. So print the sum is in brackets and then the value. You see, the sum is 120. So it worked as expected. So moving on to Python sample code 4. In this sample code, we will find if a number is even or odd. Code is on same format. On top we have code, and at the bottom we have the output that is expected. What this program does is we enter a number and it shows whether the number is odd or even. In this case, we've entered 3 and the number is odd. Now this code will check if the input is odd or even. A number is even if it's divisible by 2 and gives a remainder of 0, otherwise it's an odd number. So first we'll seek the number from the user, input integer number, which will be saved in num, enter a number. If the number, now we're using the if statement for the first time. So the number that was entered has to be checked whether the number is even or odd. And the way to do that is, if the entered number, if we divide that number by 2, and if the remainder of that division is 0, that means the number was fully divisible by 2 and it's an even number. Otherwise, it's an odd number. So that is the if statement applied here. If the number divided by 2, if the remainder of this division is 0, then the number is even number, else the number is an odd number. So it's a very simple program, and it uses the use of if statement. In if statement, if it's successful, you can do something, and if it's not successful, that is the else part, you can execute something else, right? Yeah. So let's execute this code and see. The code for this particular functionality sample 4 is odd even.py. So let's run this, Python odd even.py, right? So I'm running this code. It's seeking a number from me. Let's enter 100. 100 is an even number. So the result is on expected lines, number is an even number. Let's run this code once again. Let me enter 51, right? It should be odd number. Number is an odd number, right? So if you can relate the whole execution with the source code, when I run the code, it says enter a number. So this prompt is coming from here, enter a number, and whatever we enter will be saved in the variable num, right? Let's say we enter 50. Now this 50 will be divided by 2 and the remainder will be checked. So in case 50 is divided by 2, it's fully divisible and the remainder is 0. So it says the number is a even number, right? So let's run this program once again. This time we'll pick up a odd number. Let's say 61, right? So 61 is an odd number. So very simple. Worked on the expected lines. Let's move on to our sample code number 5, in which we'll repeat a set of statements, or the loop statement. It's very powerful. What we'll do in this sample program is that we will control and execute a number of statements in a loop. The way to do is, we have a variable called count. I'll set it to 1. What I'll do, I will execute a loop till this count becomes 5, right? So what I'll do is, I'm defining a variable as 1, and I'm setting up a loop which says while the count is less than 5, equal to 5, execute this loop. So till the count becomes 5, we'll keep on running this loop here. It will say print, it will print the value of count, and also after that it will increase the value of count by 1, right? So once we enter the loop, the value of count is 1. It should print 1, and then it should increase the value of count by 1. So count will become 2. So the control will go back to while loop. It will print the value 2 and then increase the value of count by 1. So it will become 3. So this while loop will be executed 5 times. Then subsequently the value of count will become 6. So once it will come here and the value of count becomes 6, it will breach this statement. After 5 executions, it will go to else part, which is print end of the loop. So the expected output of this program is, when we start the program, the count is set to 1. It will say start of the loop, print start of the loop. It will say start of the loop. 5 times this loop will be executed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the value of the count will become 6. Then it will come out of this loop. It will execute else, which is end of while loop. So this is the expectation from this program. Let's execute this code. It's called while loop. Python while loop.py, right? If you see here, start of the while loop, value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and end of while loop. So let's go back to the program here. So value of count is 1. It says print start of the while loop, then it shows value of count 5 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then in the loop we are increasing the value of count by 1 every time. So it will show me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the value reaches 6, it will show me end of while loop. Congratulations on successfully completing Introduction to Coding and review of 5 sample codes in Python. I urge you to subscribe to this channel and also click on the bell icon and also like this video. Now we'll instruct you how to install Python on your computer. Python is very simple to install. Go to site www.python.org/downloads. I recommend that you select the Python version 3.6 as it will work with Windows XP onwards. Please note that some of the latest version of Python, that is 3.8, 3.9, do not work with XP and Windows 7. So my advice is to stick to Python 3.6. I've used Python 3.6 to test the sample code. Download the file and install it. Once you install the Python comes bundled with the IDLE editor for Python source code. And also the Python source code that I've used is available in the YouTube video description. How to save Python code using idle? Let me start idle here. I've searched for idle and I'm starting the idle Python editor. So it has opened the editor here. What I'll do is I will take this code from here. Although you'll be picking up the code from the YouTube description, I will pick code from here. Here, I'll say open a new file. I'll cut and paste the source code here. I will save as. So I will save this source code in the relevant directory. I have a directory called Python code, and I will create a new name for this. I'll say loop.py, right? So it will save the file. Now I will go to the directory and run this file. I'll open the command, go to the command prompt, go to the relevant folder where I have saved this code, Python code. I have saved loop.py, right? So I will run this code, Python loop.py, right? So this particular program, loop.py, was nothing but a copy of while loop, but I wanted to demonstrate how to download Python, which will also install the idle editor, then how to open the editor and cut and paste the source code and save it and run it. So we have covered this now. Going on to advanced learning, we have upcoming videos. Video number 2 is Python syntax review. We will look at most of the Python syntax commands. That will be very helpful. It will give you a jump start in taking your knowledge of Python to the next level. Video 3 will be Python's endless capabilities. We will talk about how Python is being used in various fields like data mining, artificial intelligence, statistics. So advanced usage of Python we'll talk about. Video number 4 will be some complex sample Python source codes. We'll try to include 5 to 7 complex source code that you can review. I thank you for watching this video. Assuming that it met your expectations, I request you to subscribe to this channel and also click on the bell icon so that you get notification when we post the new videos. Thank you very much.